The melody drifted through the marble corridors of the Grand Astoria Hotel like a ghost from the past, haunting and achingly familiar. Marcus Blackwood froze mid-stride, his expensive Italian leather shoes silent against the polished floor as the lullaby pierced through his carefully constructed walls of grief. It was impossible. The voice was too pure, too heartbreakingly sweet to belong to anyone but his beloved daughter Isabella, who had been gone for 3 years now. His hands trembled as he pressed them against the floor-to-ceiling windows, peering down at the street below, where a small figure sat huddled against the cold winter wind, cradling what appeared to be a bundle in her arms. The same melody that had once filled his penthouse with joy now echoed from the lips of a stranger, and Marcus knew in that moment that his life was about to change forever. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The December wind cut through downtown Chicago like a blade, sending newspapers and debris skittering across the sidewalk in front of the Grand Astoria Hotel. Snow had begun to fall in earnest now, fat flakes that clung to the ornate brass fixtures and accumulated in the corners of the hotel's grand entrance. Most pedestrians hurried past with their heads down, wrapped in expensive coats and scarves, their minds focused on warm destinations and holiday preparations. But Maya Rodriguez had nowhere warm to go. The 16-year-old girl sat on a piece of cardboard she had found behind a restaurant 3 blocks away, her thin jacket doing little to protect her from the bitter cold. In her arms, wrapped in a faded pink blanket that had seen better days, baby Diego slept fitfully. At just 4 months old, he was small for his age, his tiny face pale and drawn. Maya had been doing her best to keep him fed and warm, but it was getting harder each day. The guitar case in front of her held a meager collection of coins and crumpled dollar bills, the result of 3 hours of singing Christmas carols and folk songs she had learned from her grandmother. Her voice was hoarse now, scratchy from the cold air, but she couldn't stop. Diego would need formula soon, and the shelter where they had been staying had a strict policy about infants. Too many complaints from other residents about crying babies, they had said. Find somewhere else to go. So here she was, outside one of the most luxurious hotels in the city, hoping that wealthy patrons might spare some change for a girl and her baby brother. Most people walked past without a glance, but occasionally someone would drop a quarter or $1 into her guitar case. It wasn't much, but it was something. Maya adjusted Diego's blanket and began to sing again, her voice soft and melodic, despite the harshness of her circumstances. The psalm was one her grandmother had taught her years ago, a Spanish lullaby about dreams and hope and better days to come. She sang it in English now, the words flowing naturally as she rocked Diego gently in her arms. Sleep now, little one, tomorrow brings new light. Dream of summer days and everything made right. The stars will watch over you, the moon will be your guide. Sleep now, little one, with angels by your side. 23 floors above her, Marcus Blackwood stood frozen at the window of his penthouse office, his phone call forgotten as the melody reached his ears. The blood drained from his face as he listened, memories flooding back like a dam had burst in his mind. Isabella used to sing that exact psalm, though she had made up her own words to the traditional melody. She had been 7 years old when she first sang it to him, standing on a chair in his home office while he worked late into the night. "Daddy, you work too much," she had said, her small hands on her hips in a gesture she had learned from her mother. "Mama says you need to hear something beautiful before you go to sleep." And then she had sung, her clear voice filling the room with warmth and light. It had become their tradition, Isabella's goodnight song whenever he was working late. Even after the cancer diagnosis, even during the worst of the treatments, she would insist on singing their special song. The last time he had heard it was the night before she died, her voice barely a whisper as she lay in her hospital bed. Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold glass, his breath fogging the window as he stared down at the small figure on the sidewalk. The voice was different, older, and rougher around the edges, but the melody was exactly the same. It was as if Isabella was trying to tell him something, to guide him towards something important. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and headed for the elevator. His assistant, Jennifer, looked up in surprise as he rushed past her desk. "Mr. Blackwood, "Your conference call with Tokyo is in 10 minutes, she called after him. "Cancel it," he said, without looking back. "Cancel everything for the rest of the day." The elevator seemed to take forever to reach the ground floor. Marcus paced back and forth in the small space, his mind racing with questions and possibilities. Who was this girl? How did she know Isabella's song? Why was she sitting outside his hotel with a baby in the middle of a snowstorm? When the elevator doors finally opened, he stepped out into the opulent lobby of the Grand Astoria. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors, and guests in designer clothing moved through the space with the confident ease of the wealthy and privileged. It was a world Marcus had inhabited for so long that he rarely noticed its luxury anymore. But now, with that haunting melody still echoing in his ears, it all seemed hollow and meaningless. He pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk, the cold air hitting him like a physical blow. Snow was falling harder now, coating his expensive overcoat and stinging his cheeks. He looked around, his heart pounding as he searched for the source of the music. There, huddled against the side of the building about 50 feet away, was the girl. She was younger than he had expected, maybe 16 or 17, with long dark hair that hung in damp waves around her shoulders. Her clothes were worn, and too thin for the weather, and she was holding what appeared to be an infant wrapped in a pink blanket. She was still singing, though her voice was barely audible over the wind and traffic. Marcus approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. As he got closer, he could see that she was shivering, her lips blue with cold. The baby in her arms was stirring, making small mewling sounds that suggested he might be waking up soon. The guitar case at her feet contained maybe $20 in coins and small bills, a pitiful amount for hours of work in these conditions. When he was about 10 feet away, the girl looked up and saw him approaching. Her eyes widened with surprise, and perhaps a touch of fear. She clutched the baby closer to her chest, as if preparing to run. "Please," Marcus said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I just want to talk to you. That song you were singing, where did you learn it?" Maya studied the man carefully. He was tall and well-dressed, with salt-and-pepper hair and kind eyes that seemed familiar somehow. His coat probably cost more than she had seen in her entire life, and there was something about his posture that suggested he was used to being in charge. But there was also something broken in his expression, a sadness that seemed to mirror her own. "My grandmother taught it to me," she said cautiously, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. "That melody, it's very special to me. My daughter used to sing it." He paused, struggling with the words. "She passed away 3 years ago. Cancer." Maya's expression softened, and she relaxed slightly. "I'm sorry," she said, and Marcus could hear the genuine sympathy in her voice. "Music has a way of connecting us to the people we love, even when they're gone." "Yes," Marcus said, surprised by her insight. "Yes, it does." He looked down at the baby in her arms, who was now awake and looking around with dark, curious eyes. "Is this her brother?" Maya nodded, adjusting Diego's blanket to keep the snow off his face. "His name is Diego. He's 4 months old." She hesitated, then added, "Our parents died in a car accident 6 months ago. It's just been us since then." The simple statement hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Here was this young girl, barely more than a child herself, trying to care for an infant on the streets of Chicago in the middle of winter. The injustice of it made him angry, but more than that, it made him want to help. "What's your name?" he asked gently. "Maya Rodriguez," she replied, still watching him carefully. "Maya, I'm Marcus Blackwood. This is my hotel," he said, gesturing toward the Grand Astoria behind him. "Would you and Diego like to come inside and get warm? Maybe have something to eat?" Maya's eyes darted between Marcus and the hotel entrance, clearly torn between hope and suspicion. "Why would you want to help us? You don't even know us." It was a fair question, and Marcus found himself struggling to answer it. Why did he want to help? Was it because of the psalm? Because this girl had somehow connected him to Isabella's memory? Was it simple human compassion? Or was it something deeper, something he didn't fully understand yet? "Because everyone deserves kindness," he said finally. And because that song you were singing brought back some very precious memories for me. I'd like to repay that gift, if you'll let me." Maya looked down at Diego, who was starting to fuss in her arms. She knew she should be more careful, more suspicious of strangers offering help. But the man's eyes seemed genuine. And Diego was getting colder by the minute. The formula she had managed to buy earlier was nearly gone, and she had no idea where their next meal would come from. "Okay," she said quietly, "but just for a little while." Marcus felt a rush of relief and something else, something that might have been hope. He gently took Maya's elbow and guided her toward the hotel entrance, scooping up her guitar case with his other hand. The doorman, a tall man named Patrick, who had worked at the Grand Astoria for 15 years, looked surprised to see his employer escorting a clearly homeless teenager and infant into the lobby. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwood," Patrick said professionally, though his eyes betrayed his curiosity. "Good evening, Patrick. This is Maya and Diego Rodriguez. They'll be my guests this evening." If Patrick had any thoughts about this unusual situation, he kept them to himself. "Of course, sir. Will you be needing anything special prepared?" "Had the kitchen send up some hot soup and sandwiches to my suite," Marcus said, "and ask Jennifer to contact the hotel doctor. I'd like him to take a look at the baby, just to make sure he's healthy." As they crossed the marble lobby, Maya felt increasingly out of place. She was aware of the curious stares from other guests, the way their expensive clothes and jewelry seemed to glitter under the chandeliers. Her own reflection in the polished surfaces showed a girl who clearly didn't belong in this world of luxury and privilege. "It's okay," Marcus said softly, sensing her discomfort. "You're my guest. You have every right to be here." The elevator ride to the penthouse was conducted in relative silence, with Diego making soft cooing sounds that seemed to echo in the small space. Maya found herself studying Marcus's face, trying to understand what he was thinking. There was something about him that reminded her of her own father, a gentleness beneath the obvious wealth and power. When the elevator doors opened onto Marcus's private suite, Maya gasped despite herself. The penthouse was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a spectacular view of the Chicago skyline. The furnishings were elegant but comfortable, clearly chosen by someone with impeccable taste and unlimited resources. "Please, sit down," Marcus said, gesturing toward a plush sofa near the fireplace. "I'll turn up the heat and get you some blankets." Maya settled onto the sofa carefully, still holding Diego close. The warmth of the room was already beginning to thaw her frozen fingers and toes, and she felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Diego seemed to sense the change in environment as well, relaxing in her arms and looking around with wide, curious eyes. Marcus returned with several soft blankets and wrapped them gently around Maya and Diego. Up close, he could see how thin and pale Maya was, how her clothes hung loose on her small frame. It was clear that she had been sacrificing her own meals to keep Diego fed and healthy. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked gently. Maya thought about it, trying to remember. "Yesterday morning, I think. I had some crackers I found in my backpack." The simple statement made Marcus's chest tighten with anger and sadness. No child should have to go hungry, especially not while caring for an infant. He made a mental note to have the kitchen prepare a substantial meal, not just soup and sandwiches. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of room service. Marcus opened the door to admit two servers wheeling in carts loaded with food. There was hot soup, fresh bread, roasted chicken, vegetables, and a selection of desserts that made Maya's mouth water just looking at them. "I may have ordered a bit more than necessary," Marcus said with a slight smile. "Please, eat as much as you want." Maya didn't need to be asked twice. She settled Diego in a nest of cushions on the sofa, making sure he was secure, then moved to the dining table where the food was laid out. She tried to eat slowly and politely, but hunger won out, and soon she was devouring the meal with an enthusiasm that both touched and saddened Marcus. As she ate, Maya began to tell her story. Her parents had been migrant workers, moving from farm to farm with the seasons. They had been driving to a new job in Wisconsin when their car had been hit by a drunk driver on a rainy night in May. Maya had been staying with her grandmother at the time, and Diego had been in the hospital after his birth, so they had survived the crash that killed their parents. Her grandmother had tried to care for them both, but she was elderly and in poor health when she died of a heart attack 2 months later. Maya and Diego had been left truly alone. There were no other relatives willing or able to take them in, and the foster care system was overcrowded and underfunded. Maya had aged out of most programs at 16 shas, and Diego was too young for many others. So she had taken her baby brother and left, determined to make their own way in the world. She had been doing odd jobs and singing for tips, sleeping in shelters when they could find bowl space, camping in parks when they couldn't. It was a hard life, but they were together, and that was what mattered most to her. As Maya talked, Marcus found himself thinking about his own daughter. Isabella had been roughly the same age as Maya when she died, but she had lived a life of privilege and comfort. She had never known hunger or homelessness, never had to worry about where her next meal would come from. Yet both girls shared something essential, a strength of spirit that shone through even in the darkest circumstances. "You're very brave," Marcus said when Maya finished her story. "Taking care of Diego on your own? It can't be easy." Maya shrugged, as if courage was just a normal part of daily life. "He's my brother. Family takes care of family." The simple statement reminded Marcus of something Isabella used to say. She had been fiercely protective of her stuffed animals and pets, always insisting that love meant taking care of the things that mattered most. It was another connection between his daughter and this remarkable girl, another thread in a tapestry he was only beginning to understand. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Harrison, the hotel's on-call physician, had arrived to examine Diego. He was a kind, elderly man who had been caring for the hotel's staff and guests for over a decade. "Let's take a look at this little fellow," Dr. Harrison said gently, approaching the sofa where Diego was lying. Maya tensed, ready to protect her brother, but Marcus's reassuring presence helped her relax. The examination was thorough but gentle. Dr. Harrison listened to Diego's heart and lungs, checked his reflexes, looked in his ears and mouth, and asked Maya detailed questions about his eating and sleeping patterns. "He's a bit underweight for his age," the doctor said finally, "but otherwise he appears to be healthy. He'll need regular checkups and vaccinations, of course, and I'd recommend a higher calorie formula to help him gain weight." Maya nodded, trying to hide her worry about the cost of formula and medical care. Marcus noticed her expression and made another mental note to discuss practical matters with her later. After Dr. Harrison left, Marcus showed Maya and Diego to one of the guest bedrooms. It was larger than most hotel rooms, with a king-sized bed, a sitting area, and a bathroom that was bigger than the entire apartment Maya had shared with her grandmother. "You can stay here tonight," Marcus said. "Both of you. There's a crib in the closet that we can set up for Diego." Maya stared at the luxurious room, overwhelmed by the generosity of this stranger who had appeared in her life like an answer to a prayer she hadn't dared to speak aloud. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You don't owe us anything." Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the city lights twinkling in the darkness below. How could he explain the connection he felt to this girl and her baby brother? How could he describe the way hearing Isabella's song had awakened something in his heart that he thought had died with her? "3 years ago, I lost the most important person in my world," he said finally. "My daughter Isabella was everything to me. After she died, I thought I would never feel that kind of love again, never find a reason to care about anyone or anything the way I cared about her." He turned away from the window to look at Maya, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "But tonight, when I heard you singing her psalm, I felt something I haven't felt in 3 years. Hope. Connection. Purpose." He paused, struggling with the words. "I don't know why our paths crossed tonight, Maya, but I don't think it was an accident. I think Isabella sent you to me, or maybe sent me to you." Maya felt her own eyes fill with tears at the raw emotion in his voice. She had sensed the sadness in him from the beginning, but now she understood its depth. This man had lost his child, just as she had lost her parents. They were both survivors, both trying to find their way in a world that had taken away the people they loved most. "I felt it too," she said quietly. "When you approached me on the street, something about you seemed familiar. Safe." She looked down at Diego, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. Maybe the people we love never really leave us. Maybe they find ways to bring us together when we need each other most. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He helped Maya set up the crib for Diego, marveling at how naturally she cared for her baby brother. There was something about watching her gentle ministrations that reminded him of the way his late wife Sarah had cared for Isabella when she was small. Sarah had died when Isabella was 5, a victim of the same cancer that would eventually claim their daughter. Marcus had been both father and mother to Isabella for the last 2 years of her life, learning to braid her hair and help with homework and listen to her fears about the treatments that were supposed to save her, but ultimately couldn't. After Maya and Diego were settled for the night, Marcus returned to his own bedroom, but found he couldn't sleep. His mind was racing with thoughts and possibilities, plans and concerns. What would happen to Maya and Diego after tonight? Where would they go? How could he help them build a real life, not just survive from day to day? He thought about Isabella, about the conversations they used to have about fairness and justice, and helping people who had less than they did. She had always been sensitive to suffering, quick to share her toys with children who had none, insistent on giving her allowance to homeless people they encountered on the street. "Daddy," she had said once, "why do some kids have so much and others have so little? It doesn't seem fair." "No, sweetheart," he had replied. "It's not fair. But that's why people like us have to help. We have to use what we have to make things better for others." It was a lesson Isabella had taken to heart, and one that Marcus realized he had forgotten in his grief. After she died, he had withdrawn from the world, focusing only on his business and his own pain. He had stopped the charitable giving that had once been such an important part of his life, stopped volunteering for the causes Isabella had cared about, stopped believing that he could make a difference in anyone's life. But tonight, watching Maya care for Diego with such fierce love and determination, he remembered what it felt like to matter to someone. He remembered the joy of being needed, of having a purpose beyond accumulating wealth and power. The next morning, Marcus woke early and checked on his guests. Maya was awake, sitting in a chair by the window and feeding Diego a bottle. She had managed to shower and wash her hair, and was wearing some clean clothes that the hotel staff had provided. She looked younger in the morning light, more like the teenager she actually was. "Good morning," Marcus said softly, not wanting to startle her. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in months," Maya admitted. "Diego only woke up once, and the bed was so comfortable. I've forgotten what it felt like to sleep without worrying about where we'd be the next day." Marcus felt his heart clench at the casual way she mentioned such a fundamental concern. No child should have to worry about basic shelter and safety, yet Maya had been carrying that burden for months. "Maya," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "I'd like to talk to you about the future, about what happens next." Maya tensed slightly, preparing for disappointment. She had learned not to hope for too much, not to expect kindness to last longer than a single night. "I understand if you need us to leave," she said quietly. "You've already been so generous. I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing," Marcus said firmly. "In fact, I have a proposition for you. I'd like you and Diego to stay here, permanently. I'd like to offer you a home." Maya stared at him in shock, certain she had misunderstood. "I don't think I heard you correctly." "You heard me right," Marcus said, his voice gentle but determined. "I have more space than I could ever use, more resources than I could spend in a lifetime, and after losing Isabella, I thought I would spend the rest of my life alone. But meeting you and Diego has reminded me that families come in all shapes and sizes. They're not always bound by blood, but by choice and love and commitment." Maya felt tears streaming down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was offering. A home. A family. Security for Diego. It was more than she had ever dared to dream. "But I'm nobody," she whispered. "I'm just a girl with no money, no education, no prospects. Why would you want to tie yourself to us?" Marcus reached over and gently took her hand. "You're not nobody, Maya. You're someone who sacrificed everything for love. You're someone who sang on the street in a snowstorm to keep your baby brother fed. You're someone who reminds me of the best parts of myself. The parts I thought I had lost forever. End quote. He paused, looking out at the city skyline. I can't replace your parents, and you can't replace Isabella. But maybe we can be something new together. Maybe we can be the family that each of us needs. Maya looked down at Diego, who was watching her with his bright, curious eyes. She thought about all the nights she had lain awake worrying about his future, about whether she was strong enough to give him the life he deserved. She thought about the dreams she had given up, the education she had never been able to pursue, the normal teenage experiences she had sacrificed for his care. But with Marcus's offer came the possibility of something she had never imagined. Diego could grow up safe and loved, with access to the best schools and opportunities. She could finish her education, maybe even go to college. They could have a real home, with family dinners and birthday celebrations, and all the stability she had been trying so desperately to provide on her own. Are you sure? She asked, her voice trembling with hope and fear. This is a huge decision. What if it doesn't work out? What if we're too different? Marcus smiled, and for the first time since Isabella's death, it reached his eyes. Nothing in life is guaranteed, Maya. But I've learned that the biggest risks often lead to the greatest rewards. Besides, he added with a slight chuckle, I have a feeling Isabella would never forgive me if I let you and Diego walk back out onto those streets. Maya looked around the luxurious suite, trying to imagine calling this place home. It seemed impossible, like a fairy tale that couldn't possibly be real. But Marcus's eyes were sincere, and Diego was gurgling happily in her arms, and for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been peace. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, we'd like to stay. The legal arrangements took several weeks to finalize. Marcus hired the best family attorneys in Chicago to navigate the complex process of guardianship and adoption. There were background checks and home studies, interviews with social workers and psychologists, mountains of paperwork that seemed to multiply by the day. Through it all, Maya and Diego remained in the penthouse, slowly adjusting to their new reality. Maya was enrolled in a private school to finish her high school education, working with tutors to catch up on the classes she had missed during her months on the street. She discovered she had a natural aptitude for literature and music, and her teachers were amazed by her maturity and determination. Diego thrived in the stability of his new environment. Regular meals and medical care helped him gain weight and reach his developmental milestones. He was a happy, curious baby who seemed to bring joy to everyone he encountered, from the hotel staff to Marcus's business associates. For Marcus, having Maya and Diego in his life was like emerging from a long, dark tunnel into sunlight. The penthouse, which had felt like a mausoleum filled with memories of Isabella, became a home again. There were baby toys scattered on the expensive carpets, Maya's textbooks piled on the dining room table, laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent for too long. He found himself looking forward to coming home each day, eager to hear about Maya's classes and Diego's latest achievements. He taught Maya how to drive, using Isabella's car that had been sitting unused in the hotel's garage. He helped her with her homework, marveling at her quick mind and thoughtful questions. He read bedtime stories to Diego, watching the baby's eyes grow heavy as his small fist wrapped around Marcus's finger. There were challenges, of course. Maya struggled with nightmares about her parents' death and anxiety about her new circumstances. She worried constantly that this new life was too good to be true, that Marcus would change his mind and send them away. Diego went through a difficult period of teething that left everyone exhausted and frazzled. But through each difficulty, they supported each other with the kind of patience and understanding that only comes from shared experience and genuine love. Maya learned to trust that Marcus's commitment to them was real and lasting. Marcus learned to be a parent again, to put someone else's needs before his own and find joy in the small moments of daily life. The first Christmas they spent together was both joyful and bittersweet. Marcus had not celebrated the holiday since Isabella's death, but Maya and Diego's presence made it impossible to ignore. They decorated an enormous tree in the penthouse living room, with Maya lifting Diego up to place ornaments on the lower branches while Marcus handled the higher ones. On Christmas morning, Maya woke to find gifts under the tree that she had never expected to receive. There were practical things like clothes and school supplies, but also luxuries she had only dreamed of. A beautiful guitar to replace the battered one she had been using on the street, jewelry that had belonged to Marcus's late wife, books and art supplies, and a laptop computer for her schoolwork. But the most meaningful gift was a small, wrapped box that contained a locket with photos of her parents on one side and a picture of Diego on the other. Marcus had somehow tracked down the photographs from the wreckage of their car, working with investigators and insurance companies to recover the few personal belongings that had survived the crash. "I thought you should have something to remember them by," he said gently, as Maya opened the locket with trembling fingers. "They would be so proud of the woman you've become, of how well you've cared for Diego." Maya threw her arms around Marcus, tears streaming down her face as she held him tight. In that moment, he wasn't just the wealthy stranger who had saved them from the streets. He was family, in every way that mattered. For his part, Marcus found himself thinking less about what he had lost and more about what he had gained. Isabella would always be a part of him, but she was no longer the only light in his life. Maya and Diego had brought new purpose and meaning to his days, new reasons to look forward to the future. As the months passed, Marcus began to see changes in himself that went beyond his relationship with Maya and Diego. He started to re-engage with the charitable causes that had once been important to him, using his wealth and influence to help other families in crisis. He established a foundation in Isabella's name, focused on providing support for homeless youth and families with medically fragile children. Maya became involved in the foundation's work as well, using her own experiences to connect with young people who were facing similar challenges. She spoke at fundraising events and volunteered at homeless shelters, always with Diego in tow, showing other teenage parents that there was hope even in the darkest circumstances. Her story began to attract media attention, and soon she was being invited to speak at conferences and schools about resilience and the power of family bonds. She was featured in magazine articles and news segments, always emphasizing the importance of helping others and the unexpected ways that lives can intersect and change. Through it all, she never forgot where she had come from or the song that had brought her and Marcus together. She often performed Isabella's lullaby at events, explaining how a simple melody had created a bridge between two grieving families and given them all a new beginning. One evening, nearly 2 years after that fateful night outside the Grand Astoria Hotel, Maya was tucking Diego into his crib when Marcus appeared in the doorway. Diego was now a healthy, happy toddler who was just beginning to walk and babble his first words. He had Marcus's eyes and Maya's smile, and he was adored by everyone who met him. "He's getting so big," Marcus said softly, watching Diego fight sleep with the determined stubbornness of a 2-year-old. "I know," Maya replied, smoothing Diego's dark hair. "Sometimes I can hardly remember what it was like when he was tiny. Do you ever regret it?" Marcus asked. "Staying with me, I mean. Giving up your independence?" Maya looked at him in surprise. It was not a question he had ever asked before, and she could see genuine concern in his eyes. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You gave us a home, Marcus. You gave us a family. How could I regret that?" "I know it hasn't always been easy," Marcus said. "You've had to adjust to so much, and you've missed out on a lot of normal teenage experiences." Maya smiled and shook her head. "Normal is overrated. Besides, I got something much better than normal. I got a chance to watch Diego grow up safe and loved. I got an education and opportunities I never could have imagined. And I got a father who, chose to love us, even though he didn't have to." End quote. Marcus felt his eyes fill with tears at her words. In all his years of success and achievement, he had never felt as proud as he did in that moment, knowing that he had helped give these two remarkable people the life they deserved. "I'm the one who should be grateful," he said. "You and Diego saved me from a life of emptiness and regret. You reminded me what it means to live, not just exist." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching Diego finally surrender to sleep. His small chest rose and fell with the steady rhythm of deep slumber, and his tiny hand clutched a stuffed elephant that had been a gift from one of Marcus's business partners. "He's going to have such a good life," Maya said softly. He'll never know what it's like to be hungry or cold or afraid. He'll go to the best schools, have every opportunity, travel the world if he wants to. Yes, Marcus agreed. But more importantly, he'll know what it means to be loved unconditionally. He'll know that family isn't just about blood, but about choice and commitment and showing up for each other every day. As they walked back to the living room together, Maya began to hum the melody that had brought them together. It was softer now, worn smooth by time and repetition, but still achingly beautiful. Marcus found himself humming along, and their voices blended in perfect harmony. "I still think about her sometimes," Maya said. "Isabella, I mean. I wonder what she would have been like if she had lived, what kind of person she would have become." "She would have been a lot like you," Marcus said without hesitation. "Strong and compassionate and determined to make the world better. She would have loved you and Diego so much." Maya smiled at the thought. "Do you think she knows? About us, I mean. Do you think she can see what happened after that night?" Marcus looked out at the city skyline, at the lights twinkling like stars in the darkness. Somewhere out there, other families were struggling, other children were alone and afraid. But here, in this warm, safe place they had created together, love had triumphed over loss. Hope had conquered despair. "I think she knows," he said finally. "I think she's proud of all of us." As the years continued to pass, their unconventional family settled into a rhythm of love and support that felt as natural as breathing. Maya graduated from high school with honors and was accepted to Northwestern University, where she studied social work and music therapy. She lived on campus during the week but came home every weekend to spend time with Marcus and Diego, who would become her anchor and her inspiration. Diego grew into a bright, curious child who loved books and music and asking endless questions about everything he encountered. He had no memory of those early months of struggle, but Maya made sure he knew the story of how they had found their family. She would tell him about the night outside the hotel, about the song that had brought them together, about the man who had chosen to love them both. Marcus officially adopted both Maya and Diego when Diego turned 3, making their family bond legal as well as emotional. The adoption ceremony was held in the same courthouse where Marcus had once finalized Isabella's medical care directives, but this time the proceedings were filled with joy instead of sorrow. Maya wore a dress that had belonged to Marcus's late wife Sarah, altered by the hotel's seamstress to fit her perfectly. Diego toddled around the courtroom in his tiny suit, charming the judge and court reporters with his infectious giggles. "Do you, Marcus Jonathan Blackwood, promise to love, protect, and provide for Maya Eleanor Rodriguez and Diego Miguel Rodriguez as your own children, for as long as you all shall live?" the judge asked solemnly. "I do," Marcus replied, his voice strong and clear. He had never been more certain of anything in his life. "And do you, Maya Eleanor Rodriguez, accept Marcus Jonathan Blackwood as your legal guardian and father, promising to honor the bonds of family you have chosen to create together?" "I do," Maya said, tears streaming down her cheeks, as she looked at the man who had saved not just her life, but her soul. When the papers were signed and the ceremony complete, they were officially the Blackwood family. Maya kept Rodriguez as her middle name, honoring her birth parents while embracing her new identity. Diego became Diego Miguel Rodriguez Blackwood, a name that told the story of where he had come from and where he belonged now. The celebration afterward was held at the Grand Astoria Hotel, in the same penthouse where they had spent their first night together as a family. The guest list included hotel staff who had watched their family grow, teachers and social workers who had supported them through the transition, and business associates who had become friends. But the most important guests were the families from the foundation Maya and Marcus had established, people whose lives had been touched by their story and their commitment to helping others. As Maya looked around the room filled with laughter and love, she thought about the girl who had sat on a piece of cardboard outside this very building 4 years earlier. That girl had been afraid and alone, carrying a baby she wasn't sure she could protect. She had been singing for coins, hoping that strangers might show mercy to 2 children who had nowhere else to turn. Now, she was a college graduate with a degree in social work and a job waiting for her at one of Chicago's most respected family service agencies. She was engaged to be married to David, a kind and thoughtful young man she had met in one of her social work classes. He understood her past and admired her strength, and he loved Diego as if he were his own little brother. Diego, now 6 years old, was thriving in his first-grade class. He could read chapter books and play simple songs on the piano that Marcus had bought for the penthouse. He was curious about everything, gentle with animals and smaller children, and possessed of a natural empathy that reminded both Maya and Marcus of Isabella. He still didn't fully understand the magnitude of what Marcus had done for them, but he knew that he was loved and safe and valued. He called Marcus Papa and Maya Maya, refusing her attempts to get him to call her anything more formal. "You're not my mom," he would say matter-of-factly, "but you're better than a mom because you chose to take care of me when nobody made you." It was a simple statement that captured the essence of their family better than any legal document or formal ceremony ever could. As the adoption celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, Maya found herself alone with Marcus on the penthouse balcony, looking out at the city lights that stretched to the horizon. Diego had fallen asleep in David's lap, exhausted from the excitement of the day. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't heard me singing that night?" Maya asked, her voice thoughtful. Marcus considered the question seriously. "I think our paths would have crossed eventually," he said. "Maybe not that night, maybe not that way, but somehow, Isabella wouldn't have let me miss the chance to be part of your lives." Maya smiled at the mention of Isabella, who had become a beloved presence in their family despite never having met her. Her photos were displayed throughout the penthouse, and Maya had learned to sing all of Isabella's favorite songs. Diego knew the stories of his sister in heaven, who had loved music and helped people and made their papa very happy. "I used to think that losing our parents was the worst thing that could ever happen to us," Maya said. "And it was terrible. And I still miss them every day. But I've learned that sometimes the worst things lead to the best things. If they hadn't died, if Grandma hadn't died, if we hadn't ended up on the street that night, we never would have found you." Marcus nodded, understanding the complex emotions that came with survival and renewal. "Isabella used to say that everything happens for a reason, even when we can't see what that reason is. I used to think that was naive, wishful thinking, especially after she got sick. But maybe she was right. Maybe sometimes we have to lose what we think we can't live without in order to find what we didn't know we needed." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the city below. Sirens wailed in the distance, reminders that somewhere out there, other families were facing crises and tragedies. But here, in this moment, there was peace and gratitude and the quiet satisfaction that comes from building something beautiful out of broken pieces. "I have something for you," Marcus said suddenly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped box that Maya recognized as being from the same jewelry store where he had bought her engagement ring. "Marcus, you've already given us everything," Maya protested, but she accepted the box with curious anticipation. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with 3 charms, a musical note, a heart, and a small angel with outstretched wings. Each charm was engraved with initials, MER for Maya Eleanor Rodriguez, D.M.R.B. for Diego Miguel Rodriguez Blackwood, and ISB for Isabella Sarah Blackwood. "The 4 of us," Marcus explained, his voice husky with emotion. "Our family, past and present. Isabella brought us together, and she'll always be part of our story." Maya fastened the bracelet around her wrist with trembling fingers, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. The charms caught the light from the city below, sparkling like small stars against her skin. "She would be so proud of the man you've become," Maya said softly. "The father you've been to us, the way you've honored her memory by loving other people." "She would be proud of you too," Marcus replied. "The way you've grown and learned and never given up on your dreams. The way you've raised Diego to be kind and curious and confident. The way you've used your experiences to help other families find hope." As if summoned by their conversation, David appeared on the balcony carrying a sleepy Diego. The little boy rubbed his eyes and looked around with the confusion of someone who had been deep in dreams. "Maya," he said in his small, tired voice, "are we going home now?" Maya looked around at the penthouse that had been their sanctuary and safe harbor for 4 years. Soon she and David would be married, and they would move into their own apartment a few blocks away. She would still work at the foundation and visit Marcus regularly, but their daily routines would change as they each began new chapters of their lives. "Yes, sweetheart," she said, taking Diego into her arms. "We're going home." But as she said the words, she realized that home wasn't really a place anymore. It was the people who loved you unconditionally, who showed up for you when life got difficult, who celebrated your victories and supported you through your defeats. Home was Marcus, who had chosen to become their father when he could have simply walked away. Home was Diego, who had given her purpose and strength when she didn't think she had any left. Home was David, who loved her complicated history and wanted to be part of their unconventional family. Home was even Isabella, whose spirit lived on in the music they shared and the love they gave to others. 5 years later, Maya stood in the maternity ward of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, holding her newborn daughter in her arms. The baby had arrived 2 weeks early, surprising everyone with her eagerness to enter the world. She was tiny but healthy, with David's gentle features and Maya's dark eyes. Marcus and Diego sat in chairs beside the hospital bed, both of them mesmerized by the newest addition to their family. Diego, now 11 years old and wise beyond his years, had been hoping for a baby sister for months. He had helped Maya prepare the nursery and had read books about infant care with the seriousness of someone preparing for an important job. "What's her name going to be?" Diego asked, his voice hushed with reverence as he looked at the sleeping baby. Maya looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. They had discussed names for months, but the final decision had come to Maya just moments after the birth, when she had looked into her daughter's peaceful face and seen something familiar and wonderful. "Isabella Rose Blackwood Martinez," Maya said softly. "Isabella for the sister who brought our family together, Rose for your grandmother who taught me to sing, and Blackwood Martinez for all the families that made us who we are." Marcus felt tears stream down his cheeks as he heard his daughter's name spoken aloud for the first time in 9 years. It was perfect, a tribute that honored the past while celebrating the future. Isabella would live on not just in their memories, but in this new life that represented hope and continuity and the endless capacity of the human heart to love. "Can I hold her?" Diego asked, and Maya carefully transferred the baby to his eager arms. He had been practicing with dolls for weeks, learning how to support her head and keep her secure. As he looked down at his new niece, his face glowed with pride and protectiveness. "Hi, Isabella," he whispered. "I'm your Uncle Diego. I've been waiting for you for a long time." The scene was so perfectly domestic, so filled with love and promise, that Maya found herself thinking about the circle of their lives. 9 years ago, she had been a frightened teenager sitting on a cold sidewalk, holding a baby and singing for coins. Now she was a wife and mother, surrounded by the family she had chosen and been chosen by, welcoming a new generation into their story of survival and renewal. Dr. Patricia Wong, who had delivered Isabella Rose, smiled at the tableau before her. She had been Maya's obstetrician throughout the pregnancy, and she knew the remarkable story of how this family had come together. As one of the volunteers at the Blackwood Foundation, she had seen firsthand how Maya and Marcus used their experiences to help other families in crisis. "She's beautiful," Dr. Wong said, checking the baby's vital signs one more time. "And she's lucky to be born into such a loving family." "We're the lucky ones," Maya replied, watching Diego gently rock his niece. "All of us." As visiting hours ended and the hospital grew quiet, Maya found herself alone with baby Isabella Rose. David had gone home to get some rest before returning in the morning, and Marcus and Diego had reluctantly left after extracting promises that they would be called immediately if anything was needed. In the peaceful silence of the maternity ward, Maya began to sing the lullaby that had started it all. Her voice was stronger now than it had been on that cold December night, enriched by years of happiness and security. But the melody was exactly the same. The one her grandmother had taught her. The one Isabella Blackwood had loved. The one that had brought a grieving billionaire and a desperate teenager together in the most unlikely of circumstances. Sleep now, little one. Tomorrow brings new light. Dream of summer days and everything made right. The stars will watch over you. The moon will be your guide. Sleep now, little one, with angels by your side. As she sang, Maya could almost feel the presence of all the people who had shaped their family's story. Her parents, who had loved her and Diego enough to sacrifice everything for their children's futures. Her grandmother, who had taught her that music could heal hearts and bridge differences. Isabella Blackwood, whose spirit had guided them toward love and belonging. And all the families they had helped through the foundation, people who had found hope in their darkest moments, because someone else had been willing to share their own story of redemption. Baby Isabella Rose stirred in her arms, her tiny fist waving in the air as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Maya smiled and continued singing, knowing that this child would grow up surrounded by music and love and the kind of security that every child deserved, but not every child received. She thought about the teenagers who were probably sitting on street corners at this very moment, hungry and afraid and wondering if anyone cared whether they lived or died. She thought about the families sleeping in cars and shelters, the children aging out of foster care with nowhere to go, the parents working multiple jobs and still unable to make ends meet. Tomorrow, she would return to her work at the foundation with renewed purpose. She would continue to share her story and advocate for policies that supported vulnerable families. She would raise her daughter to understand that privilege came with responsibility, that those who had much were obligated to help those who had little. But tonight, in this quiet hospital room, she was simply a mother singing to her child, passing down a melody that had become their family's anthem of hope and resilience. As baby Isabella Rose's breathing deepened into sleep, Maya felt a profound sense of completion and continuity. Their story had come full circle, from loss to love, from desperation to abundance, from a broken family to a chosen one that was stronger than any bonds of blood. The lullaby continued to echo softly in the room, long after Maya had stopped singing, carried by love and memory into the future where new stories would begin and old ones would be retold. And somewhere in the music, if you listened carefully enough, you might hear the voice of a 7-year-old girl who had once sung the same song to her father, reminding them all that love never really dies, it just finds new ways to express itself in the world. Outside the hospital window, the city of Chicago sparkled in the darkness, full of possibilities and promises and people whose lives were about to intersect in ways they could never imagine. And in a penthouse suite at the Grand Astoria Hotel, an empty crib waited for a new baby to come home, while a man who had once thought his heart was too broken to love again prepared to become a grandfather, completing a family that had begun with a song and a moment of grace on a cold winter night 9 years before. The story that had started with an orphan girl singing for coins outside a luxury hotel had become something much larger and more beautiful, a testament to the power of music and mercy and the unexpected ways that strangers can become family when they choose to see each other's humanity. And as baby Isabella Rose slept peacefully in her mother's arms, surrounded by love that had been born from loss and nurtured by hope, the melody continued to weave its magic, promising that no matter how dark the night might seem, morning would always come, bringing new light and new possibilities for those brave enough to keep singing. 3 months after Isabella Rose's birth, Maya received a phone call that would change the trajectory of their foundation's work forever. The caller was Elena Vasquez, a social worker from Phoenix, Arizona, who had been following their story through news articles and social media posts about the Blackwood Foundation. "Mrs. Martinez," Elena said, her voice carrying a mixture of hope and desperation, "I have a situation here that's very similar to what you experienced years ago. There's a 14-year-old girl named Sophia who's been caring for her twin baby brothers since their mother died of an overdose 3 months ago. The father is unknown, and there are no other relatives willing to take them in." End quote. Maya shifted baby Isabella Rose to her other arm and listened intently as Elena continued. "Sophia is incredibly bright and determined, but she's struggling to keep the babies fed and healthy. She's been sleeping in an abandoned building downtown. And winter is coming. I've tried to place them in foster care, but no one wants to take all 3 children together, and Sophia refuses to be separated from the twins. The parallels to Maya's own story were unmistakable, and she felt her heart constrict with empathy for this unknown girl who was facing the same impossible choices she had once confronted. But now Maya had resources and influence that could make a real difference. "What can we do to help?" Maya asked immediately, already mentally calculating the logistics of extending their support across state lines. "I was hoping you might consider expanding your foundation's reach," Elena said carefully. "Maybe establish a program that could help families like Sophia's, children who are caring for younger siblings and need support to stay together." Maya looked across the room where David was feeding Diego breakfast before school, their domestic routine now including the gentle chaos that came with a newborn in the house. Marcus was reading the financial section of the newspaper, while simultaneously making funny faces at Isabella Rose, who was beginning to show the first hints of a smile. This was the life she had built, the security she had fought for, the family she had helped create through determination, and the extraordinary kindness of a stranger who had become her father. Now there was another girl out there facing the same impossible odds, another set of babies who needed protection and love. "Send me everything you have on Sophia's case," Maya said decisively. "I'll talk to Marcus and our board of directors about expanding our operations. No child should have to face what we faced alone." Within 2 weeks, Maya was on a plane to Phoenix, leaving Isabella Rose in David's capable hands, while she went to meet the girl whose story had stirred her own memories of desperation and hope. Marcus had insisted on coming with her, though he stayed in the background during the initial meetings, understanding that Sophia might be more comfortable talking to someone closer to her own age. Sophia Chen was small for 14, with straight black hair that hung past her shoulders, and eyes that held the kind of old wisdom that came from being forced to grow up too quickly. She was suspicious and guarded when Maya first approached her at the community center, where Elena had arranged their meeting, clutching a diaper bag that contained everything she owned in the world. The twins, Jason and Jeremy, were 5 months old and clearly struggling with malnutrition, despite Sophia's best efforts to keep them fed. They were quiet babies, too quiet, with the listless demeanor that came from chronic hunger and stress. Sophia watched Maya carefully as she examined the babies, ready to run if this stranger showed any sign of threatening their fragile family unit. "I know you don't trust me," Maya said gently, settling into a chair across from Sophia in the community center's small conference room. "When I was your age, I wouldn't have trusted me either. Adults had a way of making promises they couldn't keep." Sophia's expression didn't change, but Maya noticed that her grip on the diaper bag loosened slightly. "I'm not here to tell you what you should do, or try to separate you from Jason and Jeremy," Maya continued. "I'm here because I understand what it's like to be responsible for babies when you're barely more than a child yourself. I understand what it's like to go hungry so they can eat, to lie awake at night wondering if you're strong enough to keep them safe." For the first time, a crack appeared in Sophia's carefully constructed facade. Her lower lip trembled slightly before she caught herself and straightened her shoulders. "How do you understand?" Sophia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya told her story then, not the polished version she used for foundation events and media interviews, but the raw, honest truth about those months on the street with Diego. She talked about the fear that gnawed at her stomach every morning when she woke up, the constant worry about whether she was making the right decisions, the bone-deep exhaustion that came from caring for an infant while being barely past childhood herself. As Maya spoke, Sophia's defensive posture gradually relaxed. She began to ask questions about how Maya had managed to find formula when she had no money, how she had kept Diego warm during cold nights, how she had known when he was sick versus just fussy. These were the practical concerns of a girl who had been thrust into parenthood without any preparation or support. "The hardest part," Sophia said eventually, her voice thick with unshed tears, "is knowing that I'm not enough. I love them so much, but love doesn't put food in their mouths or keep them warm at night. Love doesn't make me qualified to be their mother." Maya felt her own eyes fill with tears at the agonizing honesty of Sophia's words. She remembered having those exact same thoughts, the crushing weight of inadequacy that came with trying to be everything to someone else when you were still figuring out who you were yourself. Love is enough to start with, Maya said firmly. Everything else can be learned, or provided, or figured out along the way. But love, real love that puts their needs before your own, that's the foundation everything else is built on. Over the next several hours, Maya and Elena worked together to develop a comprehensive plan for Sophia and the twins. The Blackwood Foundation would provide immediate financial support for housing, medical care, and childcare, while Sophia finished her education. More importantly, they would connect her with a network of other young caregivers who could provide emotional support and practical advice. Marcus, who had been quietly observing from the corner of the room, approached Sophia as the meeting was winding down. She tensed again at his approach, clearly intimidated by his expensive clothes and authoritative presence. "I want you to know," Marcus said gently, crouching down so he was at eye level with Sophia, "that what you've been doing for Jason and Jeremy is extraordinary. Not every 14-year-old would have the courage or the love to take on such an enormous responsibility." Sophia looked at him uncertainly, unsure how to respond to praise from this wealthy stranger. "My daughter would have been about your age now if she had lived," Marcus continued, his voice soft with old grief. "I like to think she would have been as brave and selfless as you are. Your brothers are lucky to have you." It was the kindness in his voice more than his words that finally broke through Sophia's defenses. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she looked at this man who saw strength where she saw only failure, who recognized her love where she saw only inadequacy. "I'm scared," she whispered, the first time she had admitted her fear aloud since taking custody of the twins. "Of course you are," Marcus said, his voice full of understanding. "Fear means you understand how important they are to you. But you don't have to be scared alone anymore." The process of establishing Sophia and the twins in stable housing took several weeks, during which Maya found herself traveling back and forth between Chicago and Phoenix more frequently than she had anticipated. Each trip away from Isabella Rose was difficult, but David was supportive and understanding, recognizing that this work was an essential part of who Maya had become. Diego, now 11, and wise beyond his years, took a special interest in the twins when Maya showed him photos from her trips. He had grown up hearing stories about his early months with Maya, and he understood better than most adults what Jason and Jeremy were facing. "Can they come visit us sometime?" Diego asked one evening, as Maya was preparing for another trip to Phoenix. "I think they might like to see how babies can grow up happy and safe." The suggestion led to an extended visit that summer, when Sophia and the twins came to Chicago for 2 weeks. Sophia was amazed by the Blackwood family's easy affection and comfortable routines, the way they included her in their daily lives, without making her feel like a charity case or an outsider. Diego appointed himself as the twins' big brother, teaching them to play with toys and making them laugh with silly faces and songs. Marcus delighted in having babies in the house again, and Sophia was touched by how naturally he took over feeding and diaper duties when she needed a break. But it was watching Maya navigate motherhood with Isabella Rose that had the biggest impact on Sophia. Maya was patient and confident with her daughter, but she was also clearly still learning, still making mistakes, and adjusting her approach as she went. It was reassuring for Sophia to see that even experienced mothers didn't have all the answers, that parenting was a skill that developed over time rather than something you either possessed or lacked. "You make it look so easy," Sophia said one afternoon as she watched Maya nurse Isabella Rose while simultaneously helping Diego with his math homework. Maya laughed, a sound that was both weary and content. "Trust me, it's not easy. Yesterday, I tried to put Isabella's diaper on Diego and Diego's lunch in Isabella's diaper bag. David found me crying in the kitchen because I couldn't remember if I had fed the baby or just dreamed about feeding her." Sophia smiled at the admission, feeling some of her own anxiety about her competence ease. "Really?" "Really," Maya confirmed. "Being a mother, or a big sister who's raising babies, it's the hardest job in the world. But it's also the most important one, and you're already doing it better than you know." The success of Sophia's case led to a dramatic expansion of the Blackwood Foundation's programming. Maya and Marcus developed a comprehensive support system for what they termed kinship families, situations where children were caring for younger siblings or relatives due to parental death, incarceration, addiction, or abandonment. The program provided financial assistance, educational support, counseling services, and most importantly, a community of peers who understood the unique challenges of premature parenthood. Maya began traveling across the country, speaking at conferences and meeting with families who needed support, always accompanied by either Marcus or David so that Isabella Rose could come along. Diego often joined these trips during school vacations, having become something of a spokesperson himself for the experience of growing up in an unconventional family. At 12 years old, he was articulate and thoughtful, able to explain to other children how it felt to be raised by a teenage sister and an adoptive grandfather who had chosen love over blood relations. One particularly memorable trip took them to rural Kentucky, where they met the Walker family. 16-year-old Caleb Walker was caring for his 3 younger siblings after their parents had been killed in a mining accident. The children were living with their elderly grandmother, but her health was failing, and there were concerns about their long-term stability. 8-year-old Emma Walker was particularly taken with Diego, following him around the small farmhouse and asking endless questions about what it was like to live in a big city. Her younger brothers, 6-year-old Luke and 4-year-old Michael, were shy at first, but gradually warmed up to the visitors, who seemed to understand their unusual family situation. "Do you miss having regular parents?" Emma asked Diego during one of their conversations, her question delivered with the blunt honesty of childhood. Diego considered the question seriously, as he did most things. "Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like," he said finally. "But then I think about how Maya sang to me when I was scared, and how Papa Marcus taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my science projects, and how David reads me stories and takes me to baseball games. I have all the love that regular parents would give me, just from different people." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Caleb sings to us sometimes, when we have bad dreams about Mama and Daddy. He's not very good at it, but it makes us feel better anyway. That's what family does," Diego said with the wisdom of someone who had learned this lesson early. "They try to make you feel better, even when they're not perfect at it." The Walker family became another success story for the foundation, with Caleb receiving support to finish high school and eventually attend college on a scholarship while maintaining custody of his siblings. Their elderly grandmother's health stabilized with better medical care, and she was able to continue providing emotional support and wisdom while Caleb handled the day-to-day responsibilities of raising his siblings. As Isabella Rose grew from an infant into a curious toddler, she became an unofficial mascot for the foundation's work. She accompanied Maya to meetings and events, charming donors and beneficiaries alike with her infectious laughter and fearless exploration of new environments. At 18 months old, she was already showing signs of inheriting the family's musical abilities, humming along when Maya sang and clapping enthusiastically during Diego's piano practice. Marcus, now in his 60s, found himself busier and more energized than he had been in years. The foundation had grown from a small family operation into a nationally recognized organization with offices in 12 cities and programs that served thousands of families each year. But he insisted on maintaining direct involvement in individual cases, never wanting to lose touch with the human stories that had inspired their work in the first place. One evening, as he was reading bedtime stories to Isabella Rose, while Maya and David attended a foundation board meeting, Marcus reflected on the unexpected turns his life had taken. 9 years ago, he had been a broken man, successful in business, but empty in spirit, convinced that his capacity for love had died with his daughter. Now, he was surrounded by a family that spanned 3 generations, connected not by genetics, but by choice and commitment, and the kind of deep affection that could only develop over time. Isabella Rose fell asleep in his arms as he read, her small hand clutching the collar of his shirt in the way that babies do when they feel completely safe and loved. Marcus looked down at her peaceful face, seeing traces of Maya in her features, but also something uniquely her own, a spark of personality that was already beginning to emerge. He thought about the original Isabella, his biological daughter, who had been gone for so long that sometimes he had to look at photographs to remember exactly what her laugh had sounded like. But he no longer felt the crushing weight of grief when he thought about her. Instead, he felt gratitude for the time they had shared and wonder at how her memory had led him to this new family that needed him as much as he needed them. The front door opened quietly, and Maya and David returned from their meeting, their voices low, so as not to wake Isabella Rose. Maya appeared in the nursery doorway, smiling at the sight of Marcus holding their sleeping daughter. "How did the meeting go?" Marcus whispered. "Very well," Maya replied, settling into the rocking chair beside him. "We approved funding for 3 new programs, including one specifically for teenage fathers who are raising children alone. And we got approval to start the mentorship program we discussed. Pairing yes. Experienced kinship families with newly placed ones." Marcus nodded approvingly. The mentorship program had been Maya's idea, born from her own experience of feeling isolated and overwhelmed during those early months with Diego. The concept was simple but powerful. Connect new kinship families with others who had successfully navigated similar challenges, providing both practical advice and emotional support during the most difficult transition period. "Sophia called today," Maya added. "Jason and Jeremy are walking now, and she's been accepted to Arizona State University for their social work program. She wants to become a social worker specializing in kinship placements." The news brought Marcus deep satisfaction. Sophia's transformation from a frightened 14-year-old into a confident young woman pursuing higher education while successfully raising her brothers was exactly the kind of outcome their foundation existed to create. More importantly, her desire to help other families facing similar challenges meant that their impact would multiply exponentially as she began her own career in social services. "She's planning to bring the twins to Chicago for Isabella Rose's 2nd birthday party," Maya continued. "Diego has been asking when he'll see them again, and I think it would be good for all the children to maintain those connections." Isabella Rose stirred in Marcus's arms, making the small sounds that indicated she was beginning to wake up. Maya reached for her daughter, and Marcus transferred the sleepy toddler into her mother's embrace. Isabella Rose settled immediately against Maya's shoulder, her breathing deepening as she drifted back towards sleep. "Sometimes I look at her, and I can hardly believe she's real," Maya said softly, smoothing Isabella Rose's dark hair. "After everything we went through, after all the uncertainty and fear, now we have this beautiful, healthy child who will never know what it's like to be hungry, or homeless, or afraid." Marcus understood the sense of wonder Maya described. There was something almost miraculous about the security they had built, the way their family had grown from the ashes of loss and trauma into something stable and joyful. Isabella Rose would grow up knowing she was wanted and loved, surrounded by adults who were committed to her well-being and happiness. But she would also grow up understanding that not all children were so fortunate, and that those who had been blessed with abundance had a responsibility to help others who were struggling. It was a lesson that Diego had already internalized, and one that Marcus was confident Isabella Rose would embrace as she grew older. The next morning brought news that would test their family's resilience in ways they hadn't anticipated. Elena Vasquez called with information about a situation that was more complex and challenging than anything they had encountered before. "There's a 17-year-old named Alex who's been caring for 5 younger siblings since their mother disappeared 6 months ago," Elena explained during their conference call. "The children range in age from 18 months to 14 years old, and they've been living in an abandoned apartment building to avoid being separated by the foster care system." Maya felt her stomach clench at the description. One teenager caring for 5 children, including a toddler, was an almost impossible situation, even with adequate resources and support. "What happened to their mother?" Maya asked, though she suspected the answer would be difficult to hear. "Drug addiction and mental illness," Eleanor replied grimly. She had been in and out of rehabilitation programs for years, and the children had been taking care of themselves for long periods, even before she disappeared completely. Alex has been the primary caregiver for the youngest one since he was 12 years old. The scope of the challenge was staggering, but Maya found herself thinking about Alex with the same mixture of admiration and concern she had felt when first hearing about Sophia's situation. Any teenager who was willing to take on responsibility for 5 siblings, who was choosing the enormous burden of caring for others over the freedom of focusing on his own needs, deserved every bit of support they could provide. "What does Alex need?" Maya asked, already mentally preparing for another cross-country trip. "Everything," Elena said simply. "Housing, medical care for all 6 children, educational support, counseling services. But most importantly, he needs to know that someone believes he can succeed, that someone sees his sacrifices as heroic rather than foolish." Within a week, Maya was on a plane to Arizona again, this time accompanied by both Marcus and Diego. Isabella Rose stayed home with David, who had taken time off from his own job to provide childcare during Maya's increasingly frequent trips. Alex Rodriguez was tall for 17, with broad shoulders and calloused hands that spoke of manual labor and adult responsibilities. His face was gaunt from too many missed meals, and his clothes were worn and too small, clearly hand-me-downs from someone else's wardrobe. But his eyes were alert and intelligent, and there was something in his posture that suggested he was used to being in charge. The younger siblings clustered around him protectively when Maya and Marcus first arrived at the community center where Elena had arranged their meeting. 14-year-old Maria acted as his lieutenant, helping to manage the 3 middle children, while Alex kept the 18-month-old toddler, Nina, on his lap. The children were clearly undernourished and in need of medical attention, but they were also remarkably well-behaved and close-knit. It was obvious that Alex had worked hard to maintain their family unit, creating structure and routines even in the most challenging circumstances. "I know what you're thinking," Alex said during their initial conversation, his voice defensive but not hostile. 6 kids is too many for one person to handle. Maybe it would be better to split us up. Let the little ones go to families who can take better care of them." Maya shook her head immediately. "That's not what I'm thinking at all. I'm thinking that you've been doing an incredible job under impossible circumstances, and that with the right support, you can continue to keep your family together." Alex's tough facade cracked slightly at her words, hope warring with skepticism in his expression. "You really think we can stay together?" "I know you can," Maya said firmly. "Because I've seen what love and determination can accomplish, even when the odds seem impossible." The process of stabilizing Alex's family took nearly 6 months, requiring more resources and coordination than any previous case the foundation had handled. They secured a 4-bedroom house in a safe neighborhood, enrolled all the children in appropriate schools and daycare programs, and arranged for comprehensive medical and dental care. But the most challenging aspect was helping Alex adjust to accepting help after years of being completely self-reliant. He struggled with trusting adults, having been disappointed and abandoned by the systems that were supposed to protect him and his siblings. It took patience and consistency from Maya, Marcus, and the Foundation's social workers to convince him that their support was genuine and long-term. Diego played a crucial role in Alex's eventual acceptance of help. As someone who had also grown up in an unconventional family situation, Diego was able to relate to Alex's experiences in ways that adults couldn't. During one of their visits to Arizona, Diego spent hours talking with Alex about the challenges and rewards of being part of a chosen family. "It's weird at first," Diego admitted, as they sat in the backyard of Alex's new house, watching the younger children play on a swing set that the Foundation had installed. "You keep waiting for them to change their minds, to decide that helping you is too much trouble." Alex nodded, his eyes focused on little Nina as she toddled around the yard under Maria's watchful supervision. "How do you know when it's real? When they're not just going to disappear like everyone else?" "When they show up even when it's hard," Diego said simply. "When they come to your school play, even though they're tired from work. When they sit with you in the hospital when you're sick. When they celebrate your victories and help you through your mistakes. After a while, you realize that they're not going anywhere, and then you can start to relax and just be part of the family." Alex's transformation over the following months was remarkable to witness. As his stress levels decreased and his basic needs were met, his natural leadership abilities and academic potential began to shine through. He excelled in his high school classes, participated in student government, and began exploring college opportunities while continuing to be an involved and caring guardian for his siblings. The younger children blossomed as well, catching up on missed educational milestones and developing their own interests and talents. Marie discovered a passion for art and began taking classes at a local community center. 10-year-old Carlos joined a soccer team and quickly became one of their best players. 8-year-old Sophia learned to read at grade level for the first time in her life, devouring books with the hunger of someone who had been denied access to education for too long. 6-year-old Miguel, who had been largely nonverbal when they first met him, began speaking in full sentences and displayed a remarkable aptitude for mathematics. And baby Nina, now an energetic 2-year-old, was meeting all her developmental milestones and showing signs of the same intelligence and resilience that characterized her older siblings. The success of Alex's case attracted national attention to the Blackwood Foundation's work, leading to invitations for Maya to speak at conferences and appear on television programs about alternative family structures and child welfare policy. She used these platforms to advocate for increased support for kinship families and to challenge the assumption that traditional two-parent households were always the best option for children in crisis. "Love doesn't follow a predetermined script," Maya said during one particularly memorable television interview. "Families are created by commitment and care, not just by biology. Some of the strongest, most nurturing families I know are headed by teenagers who chose to sacrifice their own childhoods to protect their siblings." The interviewer, a well-known journalist named Rebecca Chen, asked Maya about the challenges of expanding their foundation's work while raising her own young daughter. "It's definitely a balancing act," Maya admitted. "There are days when I feel like I'm being pulled in too many directions. When I worry that I'm shortchanging Isabella Rose by spending so much time focused on other families. But then I remember that the work we're doing is creating a better world for her to grow up in. I want her to inherit a society that values all children, that doesn't abandon the most vulnerable members of our community." Marcus, who was watching the interview from the Foundation's Chicago office, felt proud of the articulate, passionate woman Maya had become. She spoke with authority and compassion, drawing on her own experiences while also demonstrating the policy knowledge and organizational skills she had developed through years of advocacy work. But what impressed him most was her ability to maintain her connection to the human stories behind their work. Despite the Foundation's growth and success, Maya insisted on meeting personally with every family they served, on knowing the names and dreams of the children they were helping. She never lost sight of the fact that their work was ultimately about individual lives and relationships, not just statistics and outcomes. As Isabella Rose approached her 3rd birthday, the Blackwood family decided to host a large celebration that would bring together many of the families they had worked with over the years. The party was held at the Grand Astoria Hotel, in the same ballroom where Marcus and Maya's adoption had been celebrated years earlier. Sophia arrived from Arizona with Jason and Jeremy, now active 4-year-olds, who remembered Diego from their previous visits and immediately resumed their friendship with enthusiastic hugs and shared toys. The Walker family came from Kentucky, with Caleb now a college sophomore studying engineering, while Emma had grown into a confident 12-year-old who served as a surrogate big sister to her younger brothers. Alex brought his entire family from Phoenix, and it was remarkable to see how much they had all grown and developed in the 2 years since the Foundation had first become involved in their lives. Alex was now a high school senior with a full scholarship to Arizona State University, planning to study social work, and eventually return to help other families in similar situations. But the most moving reunion was with Diego's first little brother, a 6-year-old named Tommy, whose teenage aunt had been struggling to care for him after his parents died in a car accident. Tommy and Diego had bonded during one of the Foundation's summer camps for kinship families, and they had maintained their friendship through video calls and letters over the intervening months. "Diego!" Tommy shouted when he spotted his friend across the ballroom, running toward him with the boundless energy of childhood. Diego scooped him up in a bear hug, delighted to see how much Tommy had grown since their last meeting. Isabella Rose, now a confident 3-year-old with her mother's musical ear and her grandfather's determined personality, moved through the party like a tiny hostess, greeting guests with the poise of someone who had grown up around adults and was comfortable being the center of attention. She was particularly fascinated by the babies and toddlers at the party, approaching them with gentle curiosity and offering to share her toys. Maya watched her daughter's interactions with a mixture of pride and amazement, seeing early signs of the empathy and inclusiveness that she hoped would characterize Isabella Rose's approach to the world. During the party, Marcus found himself standing near the windows that overlooked the street where he had first heard Maya singing all those years ago. The view was the same, but everything else had changed in ways he could never have imagined. The broken, grieving man who had lost his only child had become the patriarch of an enormous extended family that spanned multiple states and included dozens of children who called him Grandpa Marcus. Maya appeared beside him, holding Isabella Rose and following his gaze toward the street below. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "About how different things would be if you hadn't heard me singing?" Marcus considered the question seriously, as he always did when reflecting on the pivotal moments that had shaped their family's story. "I think we would have found each other eventually," he said finally. "Maybe not that night, maybe not in that way, but somehow. Isabella was determined that I wouldn't spend the rest of my life alone. And you needed someone who could see your strength and support your dreams. The universe has a way of bringing together the people who are meant to be family." Isabella Rose squirmed in Maya's arms, wanting to get down and rejoin the party. As Maya set her daughter on her feet and watched her toddle toward Diego and Tommy, she reflected on the truth of Marcus's words. Their family hadn't been created by accident or coincidence, but by a series of choices that had led them toward love and connection. The lullaby that had started it all was still part of their daily routine, sung at bedtime and during quiet moments when comfort was needed. But it had evolved over the years, with new verses added to reflect their growing family and changing circumstances. Diego had contributed a verse about finding home in unexpected places. Maya had added lines about the strength that comes from helping others. Even Isabella Rose, with her limited vocabulary, had begun humming along and adding her own wordless contributions to the melody. As the party continued around them, with children laughing and families sharing stories and connections being forged between people who understood the unique challenges of unconventional family structures, Maya felt a deep sense of completion and purpose. They had built something beautiful from the fragments of their broken lives, creating not just a family, but a community that supported and sustained each other through difficult times. The story that had begun with a desperate teenage girl singing for coins on a cold Chicago street had become a testament to the transformative power of love, compassion, and the willingness to see beyond conventional definitions of family. And as Isabella Rose's laughter rang out across the ballroom, mixing with the voices of all the children whose lives had been touched by their foundation's work, Maya knew that the melody would continue to evolve and inspire long after they were gone, carried forward by new generations who understood that the most important families are the ones we choose to create through our actions and our love.